CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi everyone, welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. I'm Kara Sundlin, and I'm here with Lauren Drazen, who is a college consultant, who also finds herself sometimes being a therapist, which is why we decided to have you on this show, because college planning, I know it, I have a senior, is very stressful. So thank you for being here.
Of course.
I want to talk about you for just a little bit. You
Sure.
you spent many years as an educator, and
Yes.
now you've gone into college consulting, which has become in its own right like a whole industry now.
Yes, it has. I taught for many years, different levels, and over time got really interested and started helping my students with their applications just in school. And I realized how little students and families knew about the process. And so as I was learning about it, it was a lot of and not only educating myself, but educating everybody else. And it changes so rapidly that it's actually a very exciting process. But in terms of our health and wellness, it's really important that we, keep it in check in terms of lowering the stress level for the family, lowering the stress level for the child. So it is a really important topic for us to be discussing, especially with people who are having high schoolers in the audience.
Yeah. And it starts young.
Right.
I didn't get into the process until my daughter was a junior, and I thought, okay, I think I need some help. I thought I knew how to write an essay, but whoa, it's so much more.
Yes.
But you have people coming to you, and is there a reason to start coming as early as 9th grade?
Sometimes, yes. So, it depends on the student. It depends on their motivation. I love to get to know students early because that helps me help them make good decisions about classes that they're taking, things that they're interested in pursuing in terms of their extracurriculars, the way that they portray themselves as students to their teachers, because eventually you have to develop really good relationships with your teachers because you get teacher recommendations too. There's a lot that goes into the process, and for a lot of parents it's overwhelming, and so it's important to start reading about it. You don't have to hire a college consultant necessarily, but to start reading about what can my child be doing in 9th grade in order to reduce the pressure on them to make it easier in the future.
Well, the other thing is it's stressful for us because we're the first generation of parents where our kids are maybe not going to go to some of the schools that we went to.
Correct.
I mean, there's all stuff over the Instagram of like what it was like to apply in the 90s.
Right.
I went to University of Michigan. Now it's like apparently a school that nobody gets into.
Right.
And parents are sort of having a gut check about what has really changed about the college process now.
So the common application, I think, is the first thing that caused the most major change, which is the fact that you can just check off the schools that you want to apply to. Now, a lot of the stuff is common, so it goes to all of the schools. However, each of the schools has their own set of questions they also ask the student to answer.
The supplemental essays.
So those are additional essays you have the big main essay, the main personal statement, but then you have the supplemental essays, and that complicates it. But you can apply to up to 20 schools using this one website, the Common Application. And so all of a sudden, people were applying to so many schools that schools got inundated with applications, which made their percentages, their acceptance rates go down significantly. Way down. In some cases, 30%, 40%.
When it used to be
70 might be 40 now. 70% acceptance rate might be 40. And so and the top schools some of them are under 5%, under 4%. And so that is a big stressor for families. And that's the case across the board. And it doesn't, you can be an A student, you can be a C student. The acceptance rates are all lower. So it makes it a little bit stressful, but there are schools out there for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing to remember, and to just sort of think about what is the goal for my child, and for me, the goal, and this is where like kind of the therapy comes in, it's for them to be happy. And so what do we need to do over the next 2, 3, 4 years for my child to be happy, and what do they need to go to X or Y school in order for that to happen? And the answer is no, they don't. There are so many options out there. And so you have to be really excited about all of the schools your kids are applying to. So that becomes a really difficult task for some people.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, we made the list, and you know, full disclosure, I'm having you on the show because you have helped Helena and so many other people I know, and I know you do really good work. And you know, I said to them, like, what are some of these schools? Like, I didn't even know what they were,
Right,
you know?
right, yes.
And, you know, so if you're a parent thinking like, oh, I only want to go to these big name schools, or you have dreams of the Ivy Leagues or whatever, you might have a 4-point something student with great test scores, and they still might not get into those top schools. So they need safeties, targets, and their reaches, right? That's how we start building a list.
Right, that's exactly right. And as I said, the most important, so everyone has reaches, right? And if you get into a reach, you're going to be really excited about it, and you might be definitively feeling like I'm going to go to one of those schools. But to get really excited about those schools, where some of them at this point, people who do what I do as college consultants call those schools lottery, not reach schools. Lottery. Literally like
you could
picking
be
a name
so
out of a hat.
qualified and you might not get it.
For sure, 1,600 on the SAT. I mean, some kids, just by sheer numbers, you may not get in. So it is about presenting yourself in the best light, and every aspect of the application is important. But other than that, in addition to that, rather, it's really important for students and parents to recognize the fact that there are a lot of places where their student will be happy, and there are a lot of different possibilities. So, for example, if your child got into one of their safety, or we like to call them now likely, we used to call them safety when we were kids.
Now they're likely schools.
Now they're likely schools.
And they can still be, it doesn't mean they're not a good school.
Correct. And those are the schools that are trying to kind of lure your kid to the school. So there might be offering merit scholarships. They might be offering honors programs to your student. They may be offering preferential residence, first choice for on-campus housing, things like that. Those safety schools, what we used to call safety likely schools, are the ones that are going to offer those things to students. You don't even have to apply to them, because they say, okay, this kid has a 3.5 grade point average, but our average of the accepted student is a 3.2. So if we get this kid to our school, then they're going to raise our average GPA. So they try to get, give incentives to students to go. That's exciting.
It's exciting when you get, and so we did that. We did some likely schools, and I have to say, one of the likely schools I didn't know anything about. I went to go visit University of Arizona, which I was so impressed by the relationships that they have with corporations and the internships and the jobs. I mean, even compared to when I remember going to school, I don't remember all of that. So a lot of these schools have come a long way, and the nice thing about that, you encourage that, because when you get that first acceptance, some of those schools will do rolling, so you find out kind of soon.
You find out early.
And that can be a real take off the pressure of the child, even if they don't go there. It might go there, but whoa, I'm going to college. I just got accepted. Because some of these schools are not like, we're only going to tell you in March.
Right. Yes, and then that is it. Yeah. Unless you're applying early decision, that's the.
What about the trend of Northeastern kids? When we were growing up, I grew up in the Midwest, but it was really like I was applying to, say, University of Michigan and then all East Coast schools.
Correct.
The best schools. You got to go to the Northeast, And that's not the case now. A lot of Northeastern kids don't want to stay here, and they want to go south.
Right.
There was a big article in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
And when parents first hear that, they're like, what's in the South? Or why do you want to go to University of South Carolina or Clemson?
Yes.
It's kind of new for
They're
parents.
huge now.
Yeah. So talk about that trend, and,
Yes.
and are these schools good? Because you said happy, but I know parents are paying bills. They're like,
Right.
I want a good school. I want them to have a good job.
Yes. I'm sure that some of the admissions directors and counselors would like to disagree, but I believe that the education at a lot of these schools is very similar. You get these amazing faculty who are, so well educated. They have PhDs. They've been doing research in their areas of study. They're really enthusiastic about what they're doing. And might you get a Supreme Court justice teaching a course at Harvard? Absolutely. So that's very exciting, and that is something you can only get at a top school like that, a Supreme Court justice teaching a class. But the faculty are amazing. Everyone who is on staff and faculty at any school, Clemson, Clemson, we're seeing a lot more people interested in that, University of South Carolina. The students' response is that they want to go somewhere warm. So,
And fun.
Yeah, and fun. And a lot of those schools have the fun, but they don't have the warm. So like Michigan, you mentioned Michigan, it's freezing in the winter.
Yeah. No, Helena said warm. I'm like, yeah, it's not warm. Okay.
Right, it is not warm. So a lot of them, it starts with geography and with the kind of weather that they're having, and they get excited about that, especially when you come from the Northeast. That makes a difference.
Yeah.
And so they get excited about that. And truly, there's seasonal affect disorder, right? So, and so when you are in the bad weather, when we push the clocks back and we have a lot fewer days of sunlight, and then you go compare that to when you go visit the University of South Carolina or you go to Clemson and it's beautiful out and everyone is smiling and everyone's happy and people are wearing shorts and they're throwing the frisbee on the green, and there is this feeling of enjoyment and that they really are attracted to.
And also it's expensive up here, so sometimes even though it's in state, let's say if you went to UConn, which is getting hard to, a lot of kids are getting accepted to UConn, but they're not actually getting accepted to the main campus. They're getting branched.
They're getting branched, yes.
So, but even cost for dollar, another reason if you're thinking money, the southern schools tend to be less expensive, the cost of living is less expensive, so dollar for dollar, it may not be that it's that much more money to go out of state.
It's very true, yeah, and UConn is kind of semi-privatized now, so they've made it a little bit more expensive for the average student. If you've got an excellent student who perhaps would be accepted to the UConn Honors Program, you probably are also going to get a scholarship, however. And one of the things that kind of reduces the stress in the process that people don't necessarily know about, something that I don't get involved in, is financial aid and all of that aspect of it. However, one thing that you can do is you can shop around. So if you do not do early decision, meaning you don't have a binding offer from a school, and I can talk more about that later.
We'll talk about ED coming up because that's a strategy, but let's say you didn't do ED, you get an offer from school A and an offer from school B, you can go back and say, I really want to come to you, but they gave me this.
Exactly. And my son did that for graduate school, because once they're done with their undergraduate, it was up to them to pay for the graduate school, and he said, look, I really want to go to this school, but this other school just offered me, another incentive. So he'd already gotten a merit, offer, and then they were trying to get more, him to come. And so he went back to school A, and school A said, we'll match it. So
okay, so it's not unlike shopping for a car. You need to know a lot of information and be prepared. Okay, now let me ask you this: am I the one going to do the negotiating when these offers come in, or does Helena do it?
Helena's doing it.
I can't call.
You can't really call, but you can start. You can do it with an email. It's much easier for a student to not do the negotiating.
So I'm trying to picture
live.
A teenager negotiating with
I'd like to, even hard for my son who had already graduated from college. That's a hard thing to do. But writing the email, and giving, and you can even attach the offer if you want to. If you're really serious about a school, you can say attach as an offer from, Northeastern, and this is the, but I'd like to go to your school, or vice versa, and they will take a look at it and make a decision as to whether or not they'll do that.
Okay, so let's back up and talk strategy.
Yes.
Number one, you want a very varied list, because at the end of the process, you want happy kids and you want opportunities.
Correct.
And if you're only taking those reach or lottery schools or things,
you will be very unhappy.
You might not have any options.
Correct, and that has happened with. I've heard nightmare stories for people.
Where people with perfect scores and 4 points and they get in nowhere.
Yes, and a lot of that is, I think, being ill prepared for what they needed to do for the application process, but also not having enough likely schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so you have these options of applying, and let's go through them. You have these things called, when people come up to you and say, oh, is she EDing somewhere, or EAing, and it sounds like a foreign language. These are strategies that you work with parents. So let's talk about early decision, because if you ED, which is encouraged sometimes to get in an easier way, I guess.
It is. The acceptance rates are higher at a lot of schools, at the majority of schools. So ED is early decision, and it means that you and the school, if you're accepted, are committing to one another. So the school gets 100% yield. So for every student that applies ED, they know that they're committed to the school. So 100% of the students who apply are going to that
Which
school.
helps them because schools are businesses.
Yep.
And they want to say, look at our yield. Everyone we
Right.
offered an application to
Yes.
accepted.
Right.
So that's
so when they average
beneficial.
that with the regular decision, it can help them in terms of their yield numbers are higher, right? So that's great for them. It also helps them, just get an idea of what the class is going to be like earlier in the process. So they like it. They do like it. It's great for the student, but only if the student and the family are committed to that school.
You cannot just say, I changed my mind after your ED.
Correct. You cannot
It's a
change your
binding
mind.
contract.
It is a binding contract. The exception is if you live in Connecticut and you get into UConn and the finances were, and you know that it's going to be less expensive, and you say, I'm going to go to my state school because we really can't afford it. We didn't realize how it, whatever the reason was.
That's the only. So let's say my
exception.
daughter gets into South Carolina. There's no ED there. Let's pick
Right.
an ED. My daughter
Let's
goes
pretend.
to ED to Wake Forest. She's not
Okay.
even applying there. She gets in. She could go. They could say, hey, it's this huge amount of money, and we say, whoa, we didn't know that. And she says, I'm just going to stay here in my in-state school and go to UConn. That's the only excuse?
Yes, that's the only excuse. People get out of the ED agreements for other reasons as well. For example, sometimes, if you write and say, if your child does have anxiety and all of a sudden, has buyer's remorse and says, wow, I don't think I want to go as far as Wake Forest. And I am going to, I want to go somewhere in New England where I know I'm within driving distance of home. Perhaps there's, illness in the family and they need to be closer to home. Whatever it is, you can sometimes get out of it, but it requires kind of negotiation with the school.
Yeah, so the idea is you
You're
would tell
committed.
your students, do not ED unless you really want to
100% if you're in, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I've heard at schools like SMU, it could make you like a 95% acceptance rate
Yes,
for ED.
it increases insanely. One of the schools one of the examples of the schools like you were talking about where the acceptance rates went down so significantly is University of Miami. And right now, University of Miami is really hot and their acceptance rate overall is about 19%. But if you apply early decision, it goes up to 59%.
That's huge.
Huge.
3 times, right?
Yeah. Yes, 3 times.
Three
Yes.
times the chances. So how much is it all just GPA and test scores? Because that gets people nervous too.
Okay, so it depends on the school. There are a lot of schools that have been, so that's another thing that's changed the landscape also. You had asked at the beginning, why is it become so competitive? So one is common application. The other one has to do with COVID and then the option to not submit your scores.
Ah.
So
all
the
these
option,
kids are
that
applying
has
to tough
changed.
schools
Yes, that
because
has
they're like,
changed.
I don't need to submit a test score.
Exactly. And there are plenty of students who are just terrible test takers, but they're super smart kids. And so they say, okay, I've got this great grade point average. Normally, if I had to submit my score, I wouldn't even apply to that school. But since I don't have to, I'm going to apply. So again, more people are applying, makes it more competitive. I think that for a state school, sometimes those numbers are, they won't say there's a minimum, but I think, if you're well below the 25th percentile in the testing scores, if you submit your test. Because some schools, like Florida, state schools, do require you to send your scores in now.
Yeah,
so
the southern schools seem to be more
they're starting to.
forceful about getting test scores now.
Exactly. George is doing the same thing. Some of them it's only if you're out of state, but a lot of them are still test optional. But they are kind of, I think, like a weed out kind of thing. So if you have taken, let's say you're applying to the University of Florida is a very competitive school, you're applying there and you've taken one honors course all the way through high school, and that's why, knowing what your course load is and having rigor is important, having courses that show that you've challenged yourself. So at University of Florida, if you had, a relatively, a lower GPA and you had to put your scores in, they may not read your essay or your teacher's recommendations, because in reality, it almost doesn't matter to them what those things say, because they don't think you're going to be successful at that school based on your numbers.
What if, let's stay on ED for a second. So Ivy Leagues don't do ED, right?
Ivy Leagues do.
They do?
Yes, yes.
Okay, they
so
do, okay.
Most state schools don't.
Most state schools don't.
Right.
I
So
thought,
like University of Michigan would not have that. They have early action.
Early action, which
but
means
not
you're
early
applying
decision.
like now. Like this is the time. If you're doing early action, get on it.
Get on it. It's November 1st.
Yeah.
So.
It's November 1st.
November 1st.
And so this is a strategy we did do, which now that's called EA. So the next tier down, EA. How much does EA help, and what's the strategy there?
So most schools will say that EA does not help, that it is an advantage for the student only as opposed to early decision, which is an advantage for the college itself as well. So EA means you get your application in early, usually by November 1st. Some of them are November 15th. Some of them are December 1st, whatever it is. But you hear back from that school early as well. So instead of having to wait until March, April timeframe to get your regular decision, you will hear back from them between maybe even as early as December 15th through February 1st-ish. But there are some schools that will admit, while we don't think it makes a huge difference in our acceptance rate, early action means that there are a lot more spots available in the class. So
early bird gets the worm.
Exactly. So if we have 500 spots and we fill 250 of them early action, then all these people are applying regular decision and they're applying for these only 250 spots. So, they do not generally publish those statistics, early action acceptance rates, because they are very close to the regular decision. But I believe, first of all, why not? Why not just apply early and get it out and get your answer earlier?
Well, speaking of wellness, I think getting it done, just to give time frame, if you are a parent of a junior, thank goodness I had people tell me, start now. We started touring junior year, which seemed a little bit early to a lot of they're like, where are you going? I'm like, yeah. But because I work here and I needed to get vacation time off, and then you have the summer, and then really, Helena spent most of the summer working on an essay because everything's getting turned in now. And at least then they can just focus on their studies and know all their applications are done. So from a wellness perspective, it's less stressful to get it in early.
Because, and you think about doing as much as you can during the summer. That's going to really help everybody.
When you don't have classes
When you don't have classes. Because all of a sudden you get into school, and I always say that to my students, this is for you. It's for me too, because it's stressful for me if they're late, if they're not doing it on the early side. But this is really for you, so that when you start school, you can concentrate on that. And my goal is for you to be walking down the halls and overhear all these conversations of seniors saying how they have all of these applications, all these essays to write, and you sort of are strutting along thinking, I've got most of it done. Yeah, Helena's in that position. So Helena's in that position.
Thank goodness. Yes, we had to. We forced that to happen, and she is very happy. We're going to pause for 1 second because I want you to hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be back with some more questions that'll really help you with the college process.
Support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit WheelerHealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
Okay, we're back now, trying to take the stress out of the college process. That can't happen entirely. It's become really, really stressful. But I'm here with Lauren Drazen, who is a college consultant. And let's talk about kids who, we talk about those perfect kids, but the kids who maybe didn't do so well freshman year, sophomore year. Maybe they're just B students and they're stressed out. Like, I'm not getting into college. I only have a 3.0 or a 3.2. Right. What can you say about the kids who aren't the perfect ones and why you believe they don't need to be so stressed?
Right. So everyone's going to have a list that's going to have their reaches, their targets, and their likely schools. And those lists are different depending on what you've done throughout your high school career. And I work with kids who are, have done exceptionally well, and I work with kids who've done pretty well, and I've worked with kids who've done really poorly at the beginning and then improved over time. And that's actually an important thing to note, that if your child it doesn't do well, in their first year or second year of high school, it doesn't mean it's over, because a lot of schools are very appreciative of the ability to improve over time.
Because they're 14 when they enter.
They're so young. And some of them, are just really immature as well. They don't know how to manage their time. And that's a really great thing to write about. Maybe it's not your main essay topic, but there is a section of the Common Application that's additional information. And so a lot of times I'll have students write about that transformation. What changed between 9th grade and 11th grade that changed? your classes got so, your grades got so significantly different, or that you started participating more in other things. And it wasn't just because, you wanted to get into the best college, but it was because you realized your kind of world opened up because you became more mature and more, open to new things. And that happens with all kids. And so the list is different, but there are such incredible schools out there for everyone. So if you can Google all the things, Google is my best friend. I mean, it's not like I have a crystal ball. I do research.
Are the stats, does it, like when they sit
Yeah.
there, so many of these schools say, oh, our average is this. I mean, and they seem so high for a lot of them. Is that accurate, or are they fluffing their feathers?
It's accurate based on certain parameters that they're putting in that we don't necessarily know. But I wouldn't let that be, the thing that deters you. Yeah, because as I said, holistic, the way they look at your application is holistic, which means they're looking at you as a full person. You either have your scores or you don't, and if you don't have scores, fear not. If they are actually a test optional school, they will just look at what you do give them, not what you don't.
Okay.
So that's okay.
So it's okay to not take the test.
I would say always try the test.
Take
it.
And also, should you try the SAT and the ACT, or do a diagnostic? Because I've heard they're different, and that some people around here just take the SAT, but I know some of the top private high schools recommend that you do both and see which one is better for you.
So the reason so many people do the SAT is because the state of Connecticut offers it in all the schools, or you're required to take it before you graduate. So you have a free testing day. And so they're like, I'm going to take it in March anyway, or whenever they're taking it, I might as well just do the SAT. But in reality, there are some differences in the way that in the way the tests are put together, how they make the tests, and what the kinds of questions that they ask, whether they're more critical thinking versus more just knowledge based, which is more the ACT. Sometimes the SAT trips kids up. So and you have to work fast for the ACT. So doing a diagnostic is the ideal thing.
Okay.
But
we only
it's
have
hard.
90 seconds left,
Yes,
so
go ahead.
I don't want to not, and we can maybe, if you want to ask on social media, I'll try to get some answers from Lauren, but
Sure.
In the last 90 seconds, what do you write your essay on? How important is the essay?
The essay is very important, and that's why we start in the summer. And what do you write it about? You write your essay about yourself in a reflective way. What is important to me? How have I changed? What is meaningful to me? And it has to be about you. It can't be about grandparent. I really respect my grandparent because of these things. If you respect your grandparent, you want to write about that, that's great. But how did that impact you? Is there some, but it's got to come from your heart, and it's got to come from your voice. And if a parent writes it, it's very clear.
Don't write it for your kids.
For your child.
Don't use AI.
Don't use AI for sure, because they do have AI to find AI.
Okay.
So you can't do that. But the idea is to have their own voice. And if it comes through that they've written this and it's important to them, then that is what they want to read about. There's no magic, answer.
Authenticity.
Yeah,
I've
authenticity. That's
I've
the
heard
word.
the Common App is the skeleton, the essay is the soul. But
Correct. Very good.
We're out of time right now. Lauren Drazen, you can shout out where people can find you in case they need your help.
Yes, I have a website, Drazen Educational Consulting, and so you can look it up, .com, drazeneducationalconsulting.com, but I'm sure I'm all over the place.
Have a
Health.org.